we started off with a little talk of how we're all rich now, and Bitcoin is hitting highs of 99,000. My dad is very proud of me until I told him that, well, there's going to be a pullback at some point. We talked a little about human incentive and why markets aren't exactly numbers and graphs on paper. There's human beings and psychology involved. A little bit about obviously Michael Saylor and his presentation to Microsoft. Jim Cramer, 100K. We finished up with some unfortunate war talk and how Bitcoin can bring peace. And there was another big one in the middle that I feel like we touched on for a long time. And maybe it wasn't that interesting because I can't remember it right now. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Mentor Session, the most creative name in all of podcasting. I am Gary, my fiat name, here with Nathan, and we're here to talk about anything and everything Bitcoin or anything else we come up with. Nathan, thanks for joining me today.
Of course, my friend. And how are you doing this morning? I know that I am absolutely hurting a little bit because I don't know if you've noticed, Gary, but even just in this month alone, the price has moved a little bit. It's a little bit distracting in the evening hours.
Yeah, I have noticed that. So I'm not sure what to make of it, but we're still rich, right? Are we
I
rich
think so.
now? Is that a thing now? I don't know.
I think we're rich now. I think we're at the point where we're rich, and we're approaching the point where everybody will tell us that we're lucky.
Okay.
And then they'll ask us, what's the next thing that they should be looking at? What's the next Bitcoin, Gary? Because clearly they've missed out on this one. What's the next one? And I am dreading having those conversations.
That's all right. We're the educators, man. We're
Yep.
here to do the job, and I don't mind doing it. I'm happy to talk to people about this all the time, and we're doing fine by it. I think I mentioned to you, my father finally, after many years of criticizing me for investing in funny money, as he puts it, he said "mabruk," which in Arabic means congratulations. And if you get a mabruk from Papa Mahmoud, that's big time.
That's
Like, oh
big.
man. So of course, being the contrarian that I am, I immediately had to follow that up with, well, okay, thanks, Dad. I love that. By the way, this price will probably keep going up this year, and then it's probably going to drop around 70% with a correction at some point. Oh, yeah. I know. Hopefully, I am dead by then. I don't want to hear that. Okay. All right. Well, I don't wish that, Dad, but okay, cool. Thank you. Which makes me wonder. I hear a lot of people saying that this time is different. Maybe the idea of cycles isn't as much of a thing anymore. I have to imagine, though, we're going to get ahead of our skis to some degree, and maybe we already are. I don't know. I assume there's going to be a price correction at some point,
Yep.
and I don't know how much it's going to be. In the past, we've seen anywhere from 65 to 80%.
Yep.
If do you think that happens? And if so, how much would it be? And let's preface this by saying that you and I are probably going to be dead wrong in anything we say, as almost every Bitcoiner is, but let's throw it out there. Why not?
Absolutely. So, of course, it's not financial advice because we have no knowledge about finances. Our knowledge is about Bitcoin. It's monetary and a little bit different. But I still hold to these cycles will continue to play out. And the main reason is just because it's our job, right? At some point in time, Gary, we're going to be out of a job here. And that's great because nobody really needs email support anymore, right? That's not a thing. We don't have people showing up to people's homes and walking them through how to set their email server and then, best security practices for that. It's just normalized. We have tons of services and stuff built on top of it. It's become very easy, accessible, where at one point in time it wasn't. And the same thing's going to happen for Bitcoin. There is a lot of knowledge and information to gather to learn how to do self-custody, best practices, all this fun stuff as well. But we got incredible entrepreneurs building more and more on top of it, more services, more wallets, making it easier for more entrants to come into the space. And so the reason that I kind of bring all of that up is that while at some point in time, no one will really need Bitcoin Mentor anymore. It'll just be our global money, and everyone will just be using it like they use money today. Online banking is not really scaring people off too much. They still need a little bit of help right now. Some of them do, right? And it's that information asymmetry. And so while I do agree with the overall trend that as liquidity, as market cap grows, you're going to get this sort of stabilization until we eventually find some sort of equilibrium price, which in the long term, I imagine that the purchasing power fluctuations of Bitcoin, which realistically, I'm not even sure at that point if you're going to have like a USD to compare it to. Like, I don't know what the other side, like the numerator will be if we're looking at purchasing power of Bitcoin. Maybe it'll just be I like looking at WTI. I like looking at oil and energy price in Bitcoin to kind of get a sense of where we are currently in the market.
It will be
That's
priced in World of Warcraft rings.
that's right. That's exactly. It'll be gaming currencies versus Bitcoin. It's a perfect digital fit. But while I expect as market cap continues to grow that we'll start to see less and less volatility, right? Because new capital entering has a smaller effect, right? Just based on
Mhm.
its percentage relative to the total market cap. You can't push and bully that price around as much. And plus, there'll be a ton of ongoing transactions, buys and sells at all times. It's just it increases adoption in global commerce. But man, I'm just rambling here. Most
I
people
love it because
still
you sound
don't.
really smart. So I'm just hearing your glow.
Most people, it's a beautiful glow, and I got a little nick on my face here from my son deciding that he wanted to hug me with his nails.
Oh,
He's adorable, but he's so scratchy. Most people that are probably new entrants coming in this next bull run, this kickoff, they're gonna get the greed. They're gonna get excited. They're gonna ask us about all the things and what's price gonna be, just like you did, and all this fun stuff. But they'll be attracted to the number go up. You're gonna have a certain sector proportion that will actually stay for the values, right? The kind of mission alignment. It will maybe help them see the world through a new perspective and lens that they hadn't considered before. Because for me, I was actually coming from the Austrian and libertarian school before Bitcoin. And I found, just anecdotally, but I found that that's not quite as common as I would have expected.
hmm.
Perhaps more in the early days before even I arrived, that would have been more the cypherpunks, the Austrians, the libertarians. But a lot of, we'll say, maybe like post 2017 cycle that I found, they came in for the number go up and then they learned more about it and kind of went down that school of thought. But the reason I think we'll still have the crash is that I think the majority of people will come in for good old number go up. They'll be attracted to the price action. It'll be just speculation for them, but they won't actually understand or know what they have. And without that understanding of what the actual problem that Bitcoin is solving is, you're not going to have any conviction. Particularly if you haven't, you might still be playing around with the idea that things have to be tangible. You're still looking at the exit for it as well, too. And I've read some recent kind of FUD threads on this as well, of everyone running to the exit. I was a big breakdown that I went through, was talking to a friend there on it, but the whole starting premise was this guy was making a case, 7 transactions per second, this thing can't scale and there could be a bank run and nobody would be able to get out in time because there's a limit on how many transactions you can fit into a block. And so he was talking about this
Mm.
whole idea of a giant queue of transactions of everybody trying to leave and get out and price and miners and everything collapsing. But the whole thing was built on the premise that he was thinking about Bitcoin as like a bank of storing USD and that everybody at some point had to get out, not realizing that Bitcoin in and of itself is the exit, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
He had the wrong framework about it. And I think that most people will still have that coming in. Most new entrants, the majority, will have the like, oh, I want Bitcoin so I can have more dollars, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I get it. We're busy, dude. Everyone is so busy trying to keep up with things that you don't have time to go through man, economy, and state.
Yeah.
And I love Rothbard, but it's dry. It's really dry. Right? It's not like, oh, I'm just going to curl up with this basically magnum opus treatise of economics.
No, nobody's doing that.
No, right? And
Yeah.
so we'll have the same sort of thing. I think we're going to get the same sort of pattern where you do get a little bump in price. And the way that I kind of view it, and man, I've been talking for a lot here. The way that I kind of view it is, and I said, do you remember like high school chemistry?
I remember not liking high school chemistry.
Okay, fair enough. It's just the idea of equilibrium, right? Like even if I was thinking about like a chemical in solution or like hot water and cold water, that basically everything's bouncing around randomly, and eventually you'll just kind of get that average across it, right? It'll find some point where it's just sitting in this equilibrium
I
state, right?
I I did this with the vinegar and the baking soda. Thank you
Thank
very
you very
much.
much. Very, very intellectually rigorous. And so the way I kind of view it is price. If nothing else changes, right? If the current supply that's coming to market and the current demand has reached this kind of equilibrium point, you'll get that kind of price stability, right?
Mhm.
And so when we have the halving, even though it's a decreased amount in terms of like the overall supply issuance, like I've got time chain stats here. I'll go over in a second, but we're currently like 19.78 million have been issued. So there's less and less coming to them, coming online, right? Being discovered in time. But you get the halving, and it's just enough to offset supply coming to the market from the miners that we got a little bit of an imbalance in terms of where the price, where the supply and the demand is. And
Mhm.
so At the end of these bear cycles, the people that are still demanding, that are still scooping up coins, they know what they have, they know what they're doing, and they're probably maxing out their buys, right? I
Hmm.
don't think at the mid to end of a bear market that there's really someone sitting there with capital. There may have been those guys calling for like 10K, but good luck, we'll see ya.
Mm.
And so you've got this kind of stability. We're going to offset supply a little bit. And so that price is then going to have to adjust to match the current demand, which essentially is kind of flat. You'll find that we're kind of flat, hasn't gone away for a while. And so you started this little tick up in price, right? Not it's
Yeah.
if nothing else happened, price would probably just slide up a little bit to wherever the new equilibrium position is, right?
Hmm.
And then we would just stay there. But that's not how humans behave. And this is an
No.
incredibly complex situation. So
Yeah.
price starts to sneak up a little bit as there was relatively consistent demand, but a slight change in supply. And then we've got Twitter and the news and Instagram and all these other things going around being like, hey, price go up, guys. NGU, NGU. And that starts to attract all these new entrants. So
Sure.
all of a sudden, the change in price is actually changing demand in a way that's not necessarily intuitive, because usually prices rise and that's going to cause demand to come down. Now with Bitcoin, it's kind of the other way around. This is magical power. The price starts to rise and everyone starts to freak out. The greed starts to kick in, right? They think about how Gary told them a couple months ago to buy some, and it'd be double their money at this point if they had been listening, right? So we get all these new entrants piling in, ramping up demand. But again, they have no idea what they're holding. It's not sustainable. We'll get that kind of overshoot of what the, like, again, these are all hypothetical numbers, right? Value is completely subjective. It's just kind of for like relative terms. We get this overshoot of perhaps what the next natural equilibrium would be. Overshoot, we get basically the players that are moving large capital that kind of go like, hey, I think this is hot, start dumping on retail. We'll get that big overcorrection down, because now again, just like the price rising up was causing everybody to come in, again, price rising down should be like, hey, things are cheaper, we want to buy more. But no,
Sure.
not with money. So price starts to come down. People who don't know what they're doing start to freak out and panic. We're going to have this big overcorrection down. And then over the next kind of 2-3 years, we'll find that new equilibrium level. I imagine we'll just keep stepping up in this pattern. And because the way that I view it is it's the halving that creates a slight bump, a slight kick to get things going. But it's just human psychology the entire way across. And until that information about what money is, what money should be, what Bitcoin is, how it fits in this, how it compares, until that information is so widely distributed that people understand what the halving is even coming into it. I mean, they always talk about like the halving's priced in. No, it's not. Not even close. You ask most people what the halving is, they have no clue. So how could they possibly have priced it in, because they're not aware of it or understand the complexities of it? And so until Bitcoin is normal, Bitcoin is email, everyone interacts and uses it, everyone has a base understanding of the patterns and kind of what's playing out. At that point in time, there's no information asymmetry. I wouldn't expect to see demand change as a result of something like the block reward, the block subsidy being cut in half. Does that kind of make sense? I feel like I went on quite a tangent.
No, I mean you covered a lot there, and maybe to clarify, when we say that the halving is priced in, could it be that maybe with a wink and a nod, we're referring to it's priced in by the people who are already in Bitcoin? Like,
correct. Yeah. The halving could only be priced in by people who are pricing in Bitcoin. Like,
yeah.
If you're not even in the space, how could you possibly be including that in your economic calculations?
Sure.
Right.
To a couple of the things you mentioned, like you said, there were people who thought near the end of the bear market, well, I'll wait for 10,000.
Yeah.
Confession here.
Oh no.
I'm one of the dumbasses. I did buy a little bit on the way down, but when it was at 16, I was like, you know what? I'm pretty sure this is going to drop to 13. I'm going to wait. And then I waited and waited and waited because I'm a greedy dumbass. And now looking at it at 99, I'm like, what difference would it have made if I bought it 13 or 16? Just buy.
You know what? Let me just pull that up right here. I think that's a great segue to talk about Gary's mistakes. Everybody learn from Gary's mistakes here.
Please. I've made many.
So
Learn
if
from
we
mine.
take a look at timechaincalendar.com, we are currently sitting at 98,674 USD per BTC. One US cuck buck is going to get you 1,013 sats. That's going to be below 1,000 soon. And it is for Canada already. And it's kind of a weird feeling. I remember getting like 2,000 sats per Canadian dollar not that long ago. So this is a little bit shocking for me. Current supply, like we mentioned, we've got 94.21% of the supply out there. We are on block 871,511, and we still got a bit of a ways to go before the next difficulty adjustment, which blocks are coming in hot. I noticed over the last little while that we were getting sub 10 minutes kind of consistently. Again, I haven't been paying close enough attention to know for sure, but it looks like a bunch of new miners have been plugged in or kicked on, which would kind of
Mm,
make sense, right? Because you probably had some large mining companies out there that at the previous price, with their energy prices, weren't profitable, and they
yeah.
were sitting ready to go but not turned on. And so with this recent run up, I'm not surprised to see hash rate rising, and I think we're going to get past a exahash here. I forget the next level, but I think it's zeta hash. I think zeta hash is the next unit for our guesses per second. So that's really, really interesting to see here. But quick back of the napkin math, Gary would be about a 6x had he bought at 15. So lesson
At
learned.
16, thank you very much.
Thank you. At 16. Sorry, still roughly about there, about a
Yeah.
6x or so too, which
Yeah.
I know that I'm too dumb. I don't even keep dry powder. I can't bother with it.
Really?
Yeah, there's also, and it's funny, we talk about how Bitcoin it can set you free in so many ways. And one of them is that you don't have to do this dual job of like financial advisor and trader
Mm,
and like market analyst anymore. Like I like to because it's kind of fun. It's nerd entertainment for me. But
nerd.
right, dude, I like studying, trying to learn about the bond markets, the equity markets. I'm looking at yield curves. I'm thinking about all these things. I use none of that information in any sort of practical sense. When I have money, I buy. When I have fiat, not money. When I have the crappy dollars, I buy Bitcoin. I don't wait. I don't time. There's no buy orders. I have leftover cash. Buy Bitcoin. Oh, I have leftover cash.
Wow.
Buy Bitcoin, and that has served me well. It's not even like a DCA strategy, like, oh, I'll put like this much away every 2 weeks and then it'll average out. It's literally like, oh, I don't need this, put it in Bitcoin. And the nice thing about it too is, one, I know that I won't, because this last run, I'll pull up the price chart in a second here, because in the month of November, I'm pretty sure we were at like 67 at the beginning of the month, right? Like
Yeah, I think
it has
so.
ran so fast. And so if you were sitting on the sidelines, you missed out on a ton of price appreciation, ton of purchasing power appreciation in a short period of time. But the nice thing is, well, I look at kind of financial stuff just purely for the entertainment value of it because I find it interesting. I don't have to stress. I don't have to worry about actually going in and rebalancing anything. I don't have to worry about purchasing anything. I don't have to be worrying about maybe like doing what you call like due diligence on any companies and these things as well.
Mm,
It frees up my time to focus on just earning more dollars the old fashioned way by adding value to people than having to
mm,
worry about being like a market trader, right? And so
mm.
I don't even worry about it. I'll even touch on the recent like MSRT run, the MicroStrategy run. I don't. I see a little back and forth in these things too. One, it's an equity that he can issue at infinitum. It is not Bitcoin, but he is a large Bitcoin holding company, and I will give absolute credit where credit is due. I think he has saved his zombie company, and it's a beautiful case study for other entrepreneurs going forward. And if I had money maybe trapped in some sort of like investment account, like it had to be invested for like a Roth IRA or something,
Mhm,
then sure, that looks like an option, but I don't, right? I just
mhm.
have cash. And so even the idea of getting stocks to me seems harder than just like going to bull and getting Bitcoin. But I'm glad they've had this big run. But even that, like I have no interest in MicroStrategy, even if it will do much better. And I don't begrudge anybody for doing it. And if it works well for them, great. It just adds new layers of trust and complexity that
Sure,
I don't need. Right? I
sure.
don't need, because I don't even,
Full
can you even buy like fractions of a stock? You can't, right?
I think you can through, like,
Oh, like
another
Wealth
third
Simple and
party.
stuff. Yeah, just build in
Yeah.
the layers.
Yeah. Full disclosure for me, I
Yep.
guess, I don't know, 8 or 9 months ago, I did buy one single share of MicroStrategy only
Nice.
as sort of like a,
The token.
hey, yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's like a thank you to Michael Saylor for the work
Oh,
you've done. This is my way of saying thank you. Here, I'll buy. I had some extra money that I got from dividends. Here, I'll buy
yep.
one share, and I bought it at like, I don't know, 450 or something. And of course,
Yep.
then it went a 10-way split, and now it's back to that. So it's nice. I did well with that, but it's not going to make or break me. And it's like, all right, here's my one share.
Man, you want to talk about price being subjective? Because this is something that like would probably sound stupid to most people, but maybe not necessarily Bitcoiners. Is that I would love to have a MicroStrategy share, but I want the physical paper. And I would
Oh,
want to like put it on the wall. I would want to actually
yeah.
have it as an art piece, not an investment, because that to me I think would be really interesting and meaningful and kind of like a little historical token, right? The same way
Mhm.
like I've still got a Canadian $2 bill floating around here somewhere. And I have no intention of ever spending it. Plus, it's worth nothing now, or worth less. Maybe it's a collectible, but I want to keep it for like the collectible aspect of it. Same like the $1 trillion notes, right? It's that I would want MicroStrategy, just because I think it's a cool piece of Bitcoin culture and Bitcoin history.
Mhm. It's harder to get those actual certificates these
I
days.
don't know that you can,
I think
right?
it's near impossible, actually.
It's hard to get final settlement on stock these days, man. Banks are just going crazy. Well, we've
Yeah.
been talking about price a little bit too, so I'm going to make sure that I throw this out here because I have I guess unfortunate news, depending on how you're kind of looking at it, is that we're going to get a pullback. We are absolutely going to get a pullback here. So, Jim Cramer, all I can tell you is own Bitcoin. That's a winner.
I
I
saw that. I saw that posted, and I guess like I don't know, 8 a.m. this morning. And sure enough, almost immediately after, the price dropped like $1,000. I'm like, of course it did.
Yeah,
Of course.
he is just the most beautiful counter indicator, and he just can tick bottoms like nobody else. It's kind of impressive.
Have you
Like
ever seen the movie A Bronx Tale?
I have not seen a movie at Bronx Tale. Did you star in it?
No, that would have been fun if I were in it. That was before my time as an actor, but there's a great scene near the beginning of the movie. It's one of these mafia movies, and
Yep.
they're gambling down in the basement, and there's a guy that comes in who is always bad luck. Anytime he bets on something, it goes the other way. Like they show at the beginning of the movie, he bets on a horse. The
Yep.
lead character saw that he bet on the same horse. The lead character tears up his ticket at the racetrack, doesn't even stay to the end of the race because he knows now his horse is going to
He's
lose. And
done.
sure enough,
He's just done.
it loses.
Yep.
So this guy comes in. They call him Coffee Cake because his face looks like a coffee cake, I guess, all the
All
pock
right.
marks on it and everything. And he comes in to bet on something. And sure enough, down in the basement, they're playing dice or whatever. And he costs everybody money. And the lead is like, that's it. Go get him out of here. Go put him in the bathroom. And I feel like that's what Jim Cramer is, just for wealth. Anytime
Yep.
he says one thing, just do the opposite.
And I gotta wonder, like, for us, it's kind of like this, like it's a meme. It's a Jim Cramer meme, right? It's a funny
Yeah.
little like joke, and every time it comes up, just watch it tank. He's still on the corporate media, and I know the
Of
corporate
course he
media is
is.
constantly. Are there people that take his input seriously? Because I just reflecting on it now, I just presumed everybody thought he was kind of a joke, but I don't know that that's necessarily the case.
I don't know. I mean, you say corporate media, and I guess maybe aside from politics, is there any other profession that you can be so consistently wrong and yet continue to have a job and get raises?
Politician.
Yeah, politician. Yeah,
Yeah.
politician, and next level down is corporate media.
Right, which is just the propaganda wing of the politician, right? And going to that, you're exactly right. It's how the fiat currency, the fiat money printer skews incentives that you can have complete misalignment like that. And we're well aware of these things too. But when you're dealing with the corporate media, the news is not the product. I mean, you're the product that's being sold to advertisers,
Hmm.
right? But as soon as you go to something else where the incentives are more aligned, so for example, if you got your favorite podcast or YouTube or anybody that you check out, they're probably generating their revenue based on your views. And they'll have advertisers in these things too, but their reputation is far more important. And the trust that they built up with that audience, particularly because you can leave so easily, right, means that they have to stay on point or they will be punished in the market for it. And we see that,
Yeah.
you see that all the time kind of with these downfall of YouTubers, is they tend to take perhaps a political or a COVID side or a war side, and their views aren't well flushed out or well understood, and you'll see them get just hammered for that if
Mhm.
they're not paying attention to the feedback from their audience and really trying to be accurate about that. Because at the end of the day, people really do want, like, we do value truth, whether we expressly know it or not, because we have a natural preference for correct information, for
Yeah.
being correct, and for correcting people, right?
Sure. I mean, I would say even people listening to us, I have no doubt. I mean, you'll never make any mistakes. You're perfect, but I have
Oh,
no
I
doubt
will.
that I will make mistakes
Have
on
you
this
seen my
podcast.
dating history?
But when I make my mistakes, and there will be mistakes,
Yeah.
please let me know, because everybody's
Yes.
human. We all make mistakes. I'm not going to sit here and claim that I'm perfect.
No.
Not anywhere close to it. But what a good person does is say, "Oh, I understand. I made a mistake here. I accept full responsibility for my mistake. I'm going to try to learn and be better about my
Yep.
analysis or prediction the next time, and hopefully I am incrementally better."
And you know what's funny? I'm 100% with you. I will be wrong. I guarantee that I will be wrong and I will make mistakes, but I'm never lying.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just I think one of the key distinctions there is that I'm in no way ever trying to be deceitful. I'm just telling you what I think or what I believe is true. And we're going to make mistakes. But like you, I want to be correct. Right.
Yeah.
Which is ultimately how I even got into Bitcoin in the first place. And I remember when I was a bit of a younger guy, and I've talked about this on interviews before, I thought everybody was like that. Right. Like, it's like, if I'm wrong, right. That was a
Oh,
stupid mistake. Um, my,
dumbass.
my journey down the, my journey down the libertarian rabbit hole came from getting into not fights, but like really loud, fun debates in bars.
Yep.
Right. And it was like, no, I'm fairly certain that I'm correct, but I'm lacking information to back it up. And I want to disprove it. And it was always me versus a room full of commies and socialists. Right. That was the music scene. That was the pubs. Like, it's Canada too. You're talking about like the music scene in Canada. It's unbelievably like
Wait a minute. People in the entertainment business are on the political left? What?
weird. So weird. And so I intuitively knew that things that they were saying didn't make sense and that I didn't think they were right. And that's what started pushing me down this rabbit hole of learning about like Mises and Rothbard and libertarian theory and going into Austrian economics, is because I wanted to like have the powerhouse and the ammo to win the debates, because I thought winning the debates meant having the best argument. I thought it meant being able to reason through things. And man, that was a very important lesson in learning how, especially we're humans, we're social creatures, that social approval, emotion, ego, identity, people do not, they will very easily be totally comfortable with, like, they'll get that dissonance and they will fight you so hard if it threatens their
Sure.
ego.
Sure.
Whereas again, I think that's maybe like the autistic Bitcoiner brain or something. I want it to be I want it to be right, which sounds so narcissistic to it. It kind of is a little
But
bit.
we all do to a degree.
Yeah.
But and like you said, there is that I mean, to be a Star Trek nerd for a moment, we're not all Vulcans.
Yeah.
Getting the correct logical answer is not the most important thing. And as you said, when you threaten somebody's ego, and maybe ego isn't
Yeah.
even the correct word, when you threaten or at least perceive to threaten their identity, what
Yeah.
they
I
at
think
their
it's ID.
core,
Yeah.
yeah, believe in, they're going to fight you on it tooth and nail, no
Yep.
matter what evidence you present in front of them. So that's something that I've tried to learn to do, whether I'm having a political discussion or even a discussion about Bitcoin or something. I will try to say, listen, we know that we're coming at it from different places. When I talk to
Yep.
somebody, usually who's one of my peers is on the political left and may not be into Bitcoin or whatever, because that's just the way it seems to be in the early stages. I'll say, I'm not in any way telling you to abandon any core principles you have. I'm not saying that you need to think a different way. You can believe what you want to believe. I'm just talking about this specific slight thing that in no way has to conflict with any of your core beliefs. Just
Yep.
take a look at it, and it might even support your core beliefs
Yep.
if you look at it a certain way. Just little, baby steps like that. In fact, that brings me up to something I was talking about with Dale last night, one of our fellow mentors, Dale Warburton, and something you touched on earlier. We were talking about how to, I guess, orange pill people who may not be with it yet. And we initially talked about how, and I've talked about this before, how finally reading the Bitcoin Mentor, excuse me, not Bitcoin Mentor, the Bitcoin Standard
Yep.
was kind of a huge move for me, in that it really kind of solidified my belief and understanding in Bitcoin and fundamentally what money is. I'd been in it for a long time. I always liked it, but there was always a bit of doubt in the back of my mind, and that really took a lot of that away. But as Dale said, I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to hand somebody some 400-page tome
Yeah.
to go read? I mean, I'm so lazy, I didn't even read the book. I listened to the audio version over the
love
course of
audiobooks. Yeah.
like 3 months, going on walks, mowing the lawn, going on
Yep.
drives. And we were wondering, is there something that we could show to somebody, a 30-second elevator pitch that would
Yep.
get people interested in it? And I don't have that pitch. I
Yep.
don't know what it is. And maybe you have one. I don't know what it is yet. There may be one out there, but I haven't fully fleshed it out.
No, that's a great point to bring up. And honestly, there isn't one, but there are a few little things. And again, I haven't had great success orange pilling, and I'll touch on that in a second as well too. But I love negotiations. I love communication. I love being in those kind of disagreements. I love being in those situations. For some reason, I just find it very interesting and very fun. But one of the things that I think is good to keep in mind, and I pulled this from one of my favorite books, which is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, is the not your right, but that's right. And so if you're trying to communicate with somebody and you want them to be open and receptive to the ideas and know that you're going down the right path, something to look for is not them saying that you're right, because that's kind of dismissive and it's actually trying to shut you down. Like you think about it to mom and dad, like, you knew you shouldn't be out drinking this late, and be like, you're right, right? You're not really buying into it. You're trying to get them to fuck off. Is what you're really trying to do. It's code language for fuck off.
You're smart. I'm dumb. You're the best.
Yeah.
I'm the worst. You're really beautiful and handsome. I'm very ugly. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty much from Happy Gilmore, by the way. I stole that. But continue.
Exactly. And so if you're trying to communicate with somebody with Bitcoin, you have to find out what they already believe to be true and is important to them, right? And so you could go down some type of rabbit hole like, hey, making sure that we're not over consuming our scarce natural resource is really important. And hopefully you get something like, that's right. And what you're looking for is agreement on something that you know you can tie into Bitcoin, where the initial response you get is a that's right. You know, corporations are getting money from the government and it's terrible. That's right. Pharmaceutical companies are poisoning our children. That's right. It doesn't matter. But if you start from that very open-minded listening position with the goal of basically what you're trying to do is articulate their view in such a way that they say that's right, that's the point to focus on. And then if you got an orange pill you can shove down their throat on that topic, you've got a chance there. And funny enough, I was talking with my buddy last night because we were both up late watching the price because he was working, I was working. It was just having a nice little time. And he made some offhand remark like, I bet a lot of people are really happy that they listen to you. The only people that listened to me were him and my mom. Right. And he was completely shocked by that. But again, he's a little bit more like autistic. Well, everybody wants to be correct, don't they? Brain like us too. I made the comment that I was going to get I told you so tattooed on an inappropriate anatomical part. And he thought that was funny so that everybody could suck it. But that's inappropriate. And I'm not going to say those sort of things on podcasts. But continuing on.
Will it normally read
It's a very small font. My wife made that comment. Love her to pieces. Speaking of orange pilling in a time window and how do you pull it off? We've got MicroStrategy leader and founder here. Michael Saylor is going to be talking to Microsoft.
Yep.
I have no idea what he's going to say in a 3-minute pitch, but I am definitely curious. I'm definitely curious to hear it. So we got Michael Saylor to pitch Microsoft board on buying Bitcoin. He's getting I guess it's some share activist that got him a 3-minute slot to speak, as it is something that I think that they'll be voting on, or the shareholders will be voting on as a potential option. And I forget what they have in terms of cash on hand. I'm not sure if it's listed here, but they got a giant stockpile of just money sitting there.
Yeah.
Gary, I'm curious on your thoughts. You're in the acting business. You're a smart man. I'm sure you've had a dabble of writing every now and then.
I like how being in the acting business equates being a smart man. That's very funny.
Sorry, leaving the political business equates to being a smart man.
Okay, we'll go with that.
We'll go with that. You're writing Michael Saylor's 3-minute pitch to the board. How you doing this, buddy?
Oh man, that's a fantastic question. So for those that hadn't heard about this, and I only heard about this morning, is like you said, an activist shareholder with Microsoft really wants Microsoft to put some of their treasury into Bitcoin. I don't even think it's a lot. I don't think they're asking for much. Yep. And because they have such a high amount of shares, they were offered the chance to pitch the board on this idea. They said, well, who better can we call in than Michael Saylor? And Michael Saylor agreed to do it, which brings up a whole other question that I'd love to ask you after this. But man, that's a great question. Like, what in that room to a bunch of people on the Microsoft board would Michael Saylor say to get them to do this? Because as you often say, meet people where they are. So where is the Microsoft board? What incentive would they have to do this? I wonder how many shares do people in the Microsoft board own, or are they just there as management with very little ownership in the company? And if it's just management with very little ownership in the company, I would imagine they have less incentive to do what they might view, what a normie, as we call them, might view as a risky thing. It's their mind. It's probably risky putting it into Bitcoin. That's my guess, even though we would argue that's actually the safest thing you can do long term. I don't know how you pitch that. I do you have any ideas how you pitch that?
Well, I've been playing around with it. One, I think that he is the most appropriate person for this talk in particular, because at that sort of scale and level, and the corporate interests and where things matter to them, he knows their world. He's done it. He's a great proof case for it. I know that you and I have chatted about this offline and stuff as well too. We're even thinking about, like, Saylor on Rogan. I think that would be a great podcast, but I'm not actually convinced that he would be the best for communicating with the general populace. Perhaps
Hmm,
somebody like Mallers might have a more of a personable appeal to a wider audience, right?
I
A
can
little
see
bit,
that.
right? Like
Yeah.
I would, as much as like Safe and Sailor, and we have these great kind of communicators on the subject. I don't think they're necessarily broad reaching. Whereas again, I think someone
Mm.
like Mallers is very well at articulating ideas in kind of a fun and more approachable. And I think based on his age and stuff as well too, I think he comes across as more approachable and perhaps a little bit less lecturing. Like, it's more coming from your friend, and if you want to get a younger audience, he'd be a greater fit there. But that was a side tangent. Going back to Microsoft, the one thing that I've been toying around with, but I don't have an answer for yet, is I know that Microsoft is restarting 3 Mile Island, I believe, for AI energy support.
I
So
had no clue.
yeah. So they're getting into nuclear, I believe, to power AI. Again,
Sorry. I'm sorry. What did you call it?
nuclear.
Okay. Continue. Carry on.
Nuclear. So they're getting into that. And so energy, like high intense computation and energy, is something that they are now directly getting involved in and looking at those sites too. And so even like not the treasury aspect, but having ASICs, having miners plugged into that energy source if they have excess, is just a perfect match. Like, there's no reason
Mm.
why you necessarily wouldn't. If you've got the infrastructure for all your what's it called? If you've got the infrastructure already to set up AIs or GPUs or whatever they're running,
You just cut out for like 10 seconds there.
don't
Sorry.
worry. It's also recording good in the background. I can see it.
Great. Perfect.
Nothing will be lost. For whatever reason, my internet just went and came back up.
Gotcha.
So I think the energy and computational front, there is an opening there because it's already a space that they're getting into. And so they can understand the value of, you're consuming all this energy. Oh, it's so wasteful for AI processes. And it's the same thing for Bitcoin network, adding new blocks to ledger and security overall. So I think there's an avenue there because it's already something that they're doing, and people like to be consistent with the decisions that they've already made. So there may be something on that front. The
Interesting.
the other one, and it's tough because you'd have to go back and try and identify the pain points and address them from there, right? So I'm not sure offhand what Microsoft's pain points are. And if I were going to be writing this, I think part of the thing that I would want to address is the risk of spreading themselves to things and constantly having to go for new consumer products. And the idea that I'm getting at is that because the currency debasement, because they're trying to keep up with all the other companies and things out there, like, MicroStrategy was just sitting dead in the water, but now they're fine. They can continue with their enterprise business and they
Mhm.
can save in Bitcoin. And I think perhaps what might even help, like, right the ship of Microsoft and get them going in an even improved direction, is having to stop chasing like gimmicks and changes, and, like, when you're like really going overboard on product development only for the purposes of product marketing, like, it's almost very much so like marketing driven. That
Mm.
the I think the big value add for Bitcoin on the balance sheet of Microsoft is you can stop diluting your resources to perhaps less productive, kind of just like consumer attracting things, and go back to just focusing on like building, like, you have a great suite of products already, just go make the operating system the best that it is, right? just
Mm.
just focus on like your core business. And I think that might be perhaps an approach that it'll get you off the treadmill of constantly having to fight debasement in order to do right by your shareholders, that instead you
Mm.
can continue to exist. You don't have to necessarily worry about continuing to grow new customers because everybody pretty much already has a computer, right? And so you're basically just moving between like Apple, maybe Linux, and Microsoft. And so I think it would free them up to just really focus, not necessarily on having to continue to grow their customer base at faster paces than just natural population growth, but just focus on making the core product line the best that it can be, and retaining that cash flow, and then parking the excess into Bitcoin. That's my first initial thoughts. I'm not a corporate CEO. I don't know if I would love to. I say that I'd love to be. It's like, I'm not sure that I would,
I don't know.
but could be
I
fun.
I mean, based on what you're saying, a couple things come to mind, and I'm certainly not in the corporate world either. I'm basically talking out of my ass here. But you were talking
That's what
about
you
what
do for a job.
it's what I do for a job. Exactly. If I could actually get paid to actually talk out of my ass, I assure you, I'd perfect that. If I
The
could,
Jim Carrey.
that could literally, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You said like, what is their pain point? And I'm wondering what it would be, at least in their minds, because Microsoft is doing just fine. Their
Mm,
shares are sky high, so up in top market cap area globally. Like
yeah.
what do they have to feel pain about? And I only heard that Saylor was going to do this pitch listening to Natalie Brunell's 10-minute podcast this morning.
Yeah.
And one of the things she talked about is how Apple over the past, I guess, 10 years or so has lost $15 billion in real value because
Yep.
they've just been sitting on cash reserves. Just, the nominal value is fine, but in real value, they've lost. Is there a way to present that to the board and say, listen, you probably have a lot of cash on hand. It's losing value.
Yep.
Here's a safe place to put it. Will people respond to that? They'd have to consider Bitcoin to be the safe place. And that's kind of like a different mentality, a different way
Yep.
of thinking. But
Or
you
they'd at
also,
least have to agree that you're going to get that like 30% compounded annual growth. Like
sure.
they
Yeah.
have to at least see that. Please, sorry, I interrupted you. Continue.
No, no, not at all. You might have to approach it from that
Yeah.
standpoint, still with the dollar mindset. Oh, you're going to get more, as you say, cuck bucks or fiat paper money out of
Yeah.
this. Why not?
Trojan
But you,
horse it in there.
yeah, maybe. You also mentioned it might lead to, you can make the argument, Microsoft focusing on the core things they do well and do them a
Yep.
lot better instead of trying to produce a whole bunch of different things for marketing purposes. But again, you got a big ship there. There are a lot of people, I'm sure, in that organization, including some on the board, that probably have a vested interest in continuing to just make a whole bunch of products for marketing purposes, because if they change that fundamental way they did business, some people would be out of a job. And
Yeah.
do we want that to happen? I mean, we always like to joke that, government has no profit incentive and people will just be there to work as, just work jobs. There's a term for it, and I forget, it's slipping my mind right now. But there is that degree of inertia in major companies as well. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
there to make profit, but certainly there are people that are invested in doing a certain thing a certain way, and finding that optimum profit it's not going to happen overnight. People
Yeah.
have a interest. But even to a greater point, and I'm going to leave this to you after this. Is this something that we can look to in Bitcoin? And this is a bit of a leading question because I think we already know the answer, where people become more focused on low time preference thinking,
Yeah.
making a higher quality single product as opposed to a whole bunch of different quick sell, easy gimmick products that can keep the marketing machine going and keep interest. Are we going to have beautiful, wonderful operating systems
Yep.
lined with digital golds and great artwork in the future? I don't know.
Can you imagine getting an operating system where the day it shipped was the only version that you needed?
That would be amazing.
Right? Like it's like it just works. You're good to go. And I think you're hitting exactly on what I was intuitively hitting, but wasn't articulating or didn't even necessarily realize. It's just the time preference shift. But man, trying to communicate that to a board would be incredibly difficult because you then start to think about the long term instead of the next quarter, right? That's exactly
Yeah.
it. Instead of these short term decisions to try and just make it to the next quarter to make sure that you're slightly doing better than expectations in terms of revenue and earnings, that you can look to really build long lasting kind of legacy products that will be desired and wanted. And even as touching on Apple, I'm reminded too, I forget where I heard this from. I'm sure it's common enough, at least in the server spaces, is that one of the kind of downfalls of Apple, compared to perhaps where it was in the innovation that it was doing, is that as the company grew, and again, kind of with those short-term incentives, it was the marketing team had more and more of an impact on decision making instead of the building and the engineering team. And I think
Mm,
ultimately the great companies, that it's the builders that build them, right? Like, I mean, the marketers
sure.
are great and they're necessarily they're needed to get the message out there, but the product is crap. It doesn't matter how well you
Agreed.
communicate it. And so I think if they don't have to, if their purchasing power, if their money stops melting away, if they can see that, then it frees them up to think more long term, to maybe take on larger, more meaningful products instead of just chasing revenue quarter after quarter after quarter, just trying to follow the market's expectations, right? And to really do shareholders well in the long term. But all of this just ties back into incentives being aligned because even the shareholders probably don't care, right? They probably aren't looking at what Microsoft is really doing. It's probably a lot of passive on the retail side. There's probably a lot of passive investments into kind of S&P products and things like this too. So even the shareholders are so far removed from the actual day-to-day and goals of the business. It's just fiat money flowing in. That hopefully is the shift that can make a real meaningful change for both the builders and the users.
Well, speaking of incentive, I have a question for you. We're
Yeah.
talking about Michael Saylor giving the pitch for Microsoft.
Yeah.
Not Michael Saylor's company, MicroStrategy, but for
For
Microsoft
Microsoft.
to put some of their capital into Bitcoin. And you may know better than I do.
Yeah.
Have we seen something like this before, where the head of, I wouldn't call them maybe exact rivals because their products don't completely overlap, but I think there is
There's a lot on the enterprise side. Yeah.
yeah, there's some significant overlap where the head of a rival company will go and legitimately try to make a presentation with the full intention of trying to help maximize the profit and the
Sustainability.
sustainability of
Yeah.
that rival company. And I mean, is this something that, I mean, what is Saylor's incentive here? Is his incentive just purely one of desire to see Microsoft buy into Bitcoin to help his number go up? Is there something more to it? Is this kind of a flag or I don't know, a sign for a future Bitcoin world where it actually benefits us all to go out of our way to help our rivals?
Yep.
I mean, I'm throwing out some crazy Star Trek future ideal here. Obviously, there will still be money in the future. I'm not going that commie far with
We need
Star
a
Trek.
replicator. Hey, if there's no
Yeah.
scarcity, there's no need for it anymore. But
There's
that's not going
always
to happen.
scarcity. There's
Exactly.
always
Always scarcity.
But the idea, I don't know. Why is Michael Saylor doing this? Why do you think?
I think you bring up a very interesting point. I think that the number go up for the bags is definitely important, right? And I think that's the whole reason for the corporations for Bitcoin. I think there's a few things at play, and actually one of them I think you stumbled upon that I'd never considered before, but I think is absolutely right as well too. So the MicroStrategy enterprise software, I do believe directly competes with products from Microsoft for enterprise software as well too. So it's a direct competitor and probably the largest one in the space by far. So what are the incentives? I think that one of them is Bitcoin go up and Bitcoin adoption, which is completely, it's good for MicroStrategy. It's good for MicroStrategy shareholders. It's good for Bitcoiners. It's good for everybody, right? Even the last, I've heard Ben say this several times before, even the last person to adopt Bitcoin still benefits from it, right? It's universally beneficial to have a ruler, a measuring stick that doesn't change so we can coordinate and act cooperatively, right? So that's totally fair. That lines up with everything. No issues there. The other one I think we talked about earlier in the space, which is ego and identity. I think he very much, I think perhaps with the post.com bubble, I mean, dude's a billionaire, but prior to Bitcoin, did anyone know about him? Right?
No.
No one knew. No one gave a shit. And I know that is intoxicating, right? No matter who you are. I think he's handling it very well, but he clearly enjoys being the corporate Bitcoin advocate. I think he enjoys the what would you call it, the fame and the regard and everything that kind of comes with that as well too, which I don't begrudge him. He's doing a wonderful job and it's helping me out. So again, incentives are all aligned, but I think there is the element of being like he'll probably go down as he could go down as more famous than Warren Buffett in terms of these circles.
Sure.
Right. And I think that legacy, I mean, he has I think it's hope.com and he's got the Saylor Academy, Saylor Academy in particular, like with that education for free for everyone. That is definitely a legacy product, right? That is, I want to be remembered, leave my mark on this world and leave it in a better place.
He could be a Bitcoin apostle.
Exactly. Right. I think that's exactly it, which might explain why he was so offended when Scottie Pippen said he knew Satoshi, which I couldn't, right? Because if he's a Bitcoin apostle, that's heresy.
Yeah.
And so,
And it sounded like he was talking about it in religious terms. And I was watching his interview with
yeah,
Patrick Bet David.
yeah.
He was like, you just don't talk about Satoshi that way. That's not the way we refer to Satoshi. I'm like,
Right.
we're
It's
talking about
with this
Jesus here? What are we doing?
that's exactly it. It has like a religious reverence to it. And so I think that that is part of it in terms of how he views himself, how he'd like to be viewed and how he'd like to be remembered. And hey, we all have those same desires. We all want to be loved as well too. There's nothing wrong with that, and it is incredibly motivating. So those two are probably the big one. But the other one
Mm,
that you mentioned, and I don't even think you realized you mentioned, is that I kind of went, huh, is I don't think MicroStrategy is going to be a competitor with Microsoft anymore.
mm.
Right?
I've heard this argument. Go ahead.
Yes, essentially, I think that they had the enterprise software and they were good and they had their existing customers, but it's really not necessarily growing. I'm sure it has now with brand recognition a little bit,
Hmm.
but it's kind of a dead, especially in a fiat system that's just going to centralize and go to basically an artificial monopoly. That they're kind of dead in the water, and this was the strategy to save them. And I think the pivot to the macro strategy could be Lightning infrastructure, Bitcoin products, things like that, or Bitcoin enterprise products. I think that they're absolutely planning on using their treasury reserve for something in Bitcoin infrastructure.
Mm,
That
mm.
will the money will not be spent, but it will be used in some sort of way. And so I didn't even think of that. But as soon as you say like, yeah, they're a competitor, it's like maybe he doesn't think that they are or that they will
Interesting.
be, right?
Or, or does maybe MicroStrategy just becomes a Bitcoin bank? Maybe that's just what they pivot to.
It's just it could be just a Bitcoin bank. It could be just a liquidity provider for commercial businesses and Lightning channels and things like that as well too. There's who knows what the
Yeah.
beautiful free market will come up with, but maybe it lines up with his bags, it lines up with his identity, and maybe they don't compete as much in the future.
Interesting. Well, I know we got to finish up soon. I have one more question.
Yep.
For thank you, by the way, Nate. You have been behind the creation of the Orange Circle, a new kind of service that we're providing over at Bitcoin Mentor, and that's going to be launching at some point soon. If I said it too early, tell me because I
Yep.
don't know if I was supposed to mention it right here. But I'm going to mention. You can cut this part out if you want to cut it out.
Let's
But
tease it for the 5 listeners. Like, yeah, we are trying
sure,
to build more
yeah.
stuff.
And in the little logo up top, our little orange circle logo, if I can bring it up here, you have, where are we right now? An establish date and established 868266. Obviously, that refers to the block at the time that we established the orange circle. I like a little, again, I think I'm now bringing up Star Trek for the third time in this conversation. It's almost like a little star date type thing, which is fun, neat.
Mhm.
And you said there's a significance to the block date. And because I'm dumb, please let me in on the significance.
So, in terms of establishing the established date, there is that you have a little bit of wiggle room between like idea and launch. It's like what do you call the kind of the first day? And so this was the co-founder for Bitcoin Mentor and the one that is starting the Orange Circle here. It is on Halloween of 2024. Which, if you've been in Bitcoin long enough to know that 1031 is the Bitcoin white paper day. So we thought that there was no more appropriate establishment day than the white paper day.
I'm
And
dumb.
yeah, and even if you could get a little bit of wiggle room there too, it was a Luxor block. We decided that a Luxor block would probably be the best one. I would have personally loved if there was an ocean block that day, but I don't think there was.
Thank you.
You're very
Thank you.
welcome, my
I
friend.
appreciate that. Yeah. In all future podcasts, please just let me assume the position of the person who just needs to know. You can educate some of our listeners through me and educate me in the process. Thank you very much. Anything
We'll
else you
teach
want to
each
touch on
other.
today? Well, yes, we'll teach each other.
We'll
I
teach
think,
each other.
sure.
You'll have to
Anything else
love my
you?
communication skills. See, I'm just
You
interrupting you. I'm terrible at this.
no, not at all. Anything else you want to touch on?
No, you know what? Actually, the last thing that I'll touch on, just because I think it's important, and we're not going to go into a deep dive, but maybe we'll next time as well too, was just the recent kind of seems like escalations in the Ukraine and Russian conflict as well too, and I think it's just a reminder that the existing system is so terrible and incentive misaligned that you could have what I think is a pretty damning mandate for the new government coming in, a pretty damning, what you call it, like evaluation of the current administration and the current policies with the recent U.S. election, and then to have the U.S. escalating tensions there, and then Russia responding as well too, for basically an organization that's been fired. Like, we fired you. Please don't break anything on the way out, but keep doing your job until January.
Yeah, you get to hold your job for the next 60 days, do whatever you want.
Yeah, do whatever you want, right? We can't do anything else, right? Just please don't steal office supplies. All right. And I just want to just reiterate the importance that at this scale in particular, like, people are like, oh, humans are always conflict. It's like, it would never happen at this scale. Like, why on earth would Americans have any interest in attacking Russians that they have no necessarily ill will with, or you don't know? You don't have violent feelings of aggression towards people you don't know that are threatening you.
I do not.
Yeah. Right? It's become such an abstract, and I just want to reiterate the points that as things seem to be getting a little bit tense, and I hope that nothing else happens too, is that all of this global conflict, it's not wanted by the people, it's wanted by the state, and it's only possible with the fiat money printer, with theft, with taxation, inflation, all of it, right? If people had to voluntarily pay with their value in order to do these things, one, they couldn't go on that long. You'd run out of money, right? If you had to use your private property, your treasury, in order to fund these things, one, there's an end date to it. There's now a cost imposed on you on it. And then additionally, even going back to the corporate media, it's like, we'll go back to the war in Iraq, right? Everyone looks at that now, I think, pretty objectively, as like a terrible decision that we were lied into. Keyword being lied into, right? The population doesn't naturally want to go. They don't want to go fight with Saddam, right? That wasn't just like, you didn't have everybody at the Mets game being like, you know what, fuck Iraq, like that. Like, they didn't care because it didn't matter to their lives or affect their incentives. And I just really wanted to just at least touch on that Bitcoin is peace, because you cannot have people spending other people's monies on things that profit them. You can only spend your own money.
Sure. I think you're right. I think something I've argued many times. I know Saifedean, that's one of his core arguments about the future with Bitcoin. You know, if you're actually forced to pay the cost for these wars, you're going to be a lot less likely to just be like, yeah, go bomb some kids, no problem at all. Because, oh, you're sending me the bill now. It's not something that my grandkids pay, or that I pay in some vague way with increased prices, with inflation. You know, that, okay, yeah, it makes me think about it. Now, all that said, and I'm with you 100% on all that, I think it's going to greatly increase peace and reduce violence. There is part of me in the back of my mind as a fellow South Park fan. I don't remember if you know the episode where Cartman ends up in the future because he wants to buy the Nintendo Wii, and nobody has any religion in the future. So in theory, there's going to be no more wars, but there's just as many wars in the future. They're just all instead fighting over who has the correct science. Yeah. So I don't know what the future
Those
Bitcoin
damn
world is.
otters.
Exactly.
Those damn otters.
Will a future Bitcoin world be without war? I don't think so. I think the best we can hope for is that there will be fewer wars, and they might end a lot sooner, I hope.
Yep. I think that they will it'll almost be like a trend to zero, but never necessarily get there. That they will be, that essentially that you would only have a larger scale conflict would be in defense or conquest. That would really be about it. And it would have to be a direct incentives of the participants as well. Right. But even if, again, we all get a lot richer when we exchange value voluntarily. You can go back to, like, even to take an extreme example, or a silly example, I suppose, is like, you can look at England and France, who used to just battle it out all the time.
Yeah.
They don't anymore.
No.
Why? They're trading.
Yeah.
They're trading all the time. They don't have the incentives. It's easier to get value and resources from them by peaceful means than by violent ones. It's less costly. You can look at Canada and the US.
Yeah, it's an old saying. Like, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I forget who it was that came up with that saying. But when goods and services cross borders, armies don't. And
Exactly. And so will we have no war and conflict? Absolutely not. And again, to just kind of go back to Austrian economic theory, is that groups don't act in economic ways. That's silly. It's individuals that are always acting. And so it had to go, will we have individuals that have conflict? Yeah. That'll probably still happen. And so if on the individual level, we'll still have some maybe fighting, conflict, dispute, then it makes sense that in an aggregate of individuals, although I think the scale will be much smaller, we would still have fighting conflict dispute. I mean, we have to determine that our name for science is the correct one and go battle with the otters. It'll still happen.
I think that's a perfect place in which to leave it.
Thank you so much for tuning in. You don't have to, but if it's not too inconvenient, a like, a share, or a subscribe is hugely appreciated. If you'd like to learn more about Bitcoin Mentor education and consulting services, head on over to bitcoinmentor.io to book a free discovery call.